or simply from the standpoint of lower prices and a fundamental floor, we simply think that over the next 12 to 18 months at least that the global economies will not do well, that will decline perhaps on the level of 2 to 3 or 4% on average for the world. We're definitely in a recession. The question is how long and how significant. We would suggest that the global recession will be the most significant global downturn in the past several decades at least. In the United States, we'll see negative growth for the next 12 to 18 months, perhaps in the order of 2 to 3 to 4%. Other economies will do better. Selected Asian economies, selected emerging market economies may even show positive growth. Well, he has to do more of the same. He has to do more government spending. He has to bail out the auto industry, in our opinion. He has to provide relief to American homeowners in the form of their mortgage payments and their total principal owed. He has to stop the process of foreclosures that are sending many American families out onto the streets and out of their homes and basically producing neighborhoods that are half vacant. So President Obama has a considerable job ahead of him. It consists in shoring up not only the financial community and not only Wall Street, but in providing relief to Main Street. That has been the significant factor that's been absent in the Bush administration. Bush has focused primarily on Wall Street and the salvation of the banks and the financial complex, whereas Main Street has suffered. I think President Obama going forward has to take both into consideration. We have a situation where we're involved in a delevering economy, not just in the U.S., but from a global market context. That means that all types of levered entities, whether they're investment banks or hedge funds, are simply shedding leverage, meaning selling assets in order to reduce the amount of debt that they have relative to equity. That's an environment in which equity investments don't do well, not because they're not of value, not because there's not fundamental value underpinning them, but simply because they have to be liquidated based upon this concept of delevering. I would suggest it's not quite time yet to step in and start buying. I suspect it's perhaps a few months down the road. I see Asian markets and Taiwan as well being on the upside on a relative basis compared to other global economies. Asia has not experienced the same problems in terms of financial leverage. It doesn't mean that they haven't made mistakes, but they learned, I think, substantially from problems in the late 1990s, and their balance sheets, their savings rates, their economies are much better positioned than the rest of the world. China is used to double-digit growth. I think China well knows, and the world as well knows, that they can't continue to grow at a double-digit rate when the rest of the world is moving in the negative column. So China will have to be comfortable with a lower rate of growth, perhaps in the 6 to 7% area, as opposed to the 11 to 12% rates that they're used to. They will manage to survive this current crisis much better and perhaps best of all relative to other major economies.
这个罗斯呢，真的非常的厉害。他除了在2年前成功的最早的预言金融海啸，而且当时话一说出来还成为华尔街的笑话之外，在我们访问他的时候，他完全没有看到中国的统计数字，因为中国官方的数字还没有出来。就在这个礼拜4的时刻，中国正式的统计数字出炉。中国第4季2008年，它的成长率只剩下6.8%。 刚好就和我们访问葛罗斯的时候他的判断，中国必须忍受比较低的成长率。他预估中国保8有困难，成长率大概就是6%到7%。当中国第4季的成长率只有6.8%的时刻，中国没有任何的选择。不能回头，不只是他现有的振兴方案要赶快的执行到位，他必须启动第2波的振兴方案，才能够挽救中国的失业率不要高攀到10%以上。而克鲁曼呢给美国的建议，他认为呢，美国根本不能够管他的预算赤字，哪怕负债高达 GDP 的8%到10%，美国呢都只能够不回头的大胆举债。我们来听一下克鲁曼的建议。
金融乱世中哪里有一盏明灯，告诉我们问题到底出在哪，未来又该何去何从？今年诺贝尔经济学奖得主、现任美国普林斯顿大学教授 Paul Krugman 或许就是最好的答案。
We used to have an old-fashioned banking system with banks, like I said, marble buildings, and the banks made loans and they held on to them. And that system was all regulated and had lots of guarantees. Now, sometimes things went bad, but there were it was like there were limits on how far out of control it could go. And we had all this financial innovation, as people call it, all these things that were created. And a lot of that was probably a bad idea. And what's certainly true is the regulation didn't keep up with it. And so we had a system that was allowed to run wild. And, boy, that means that the crack-up is bigger when it comes.
克鲁曼最为人称道的就是用浅显的话来说明这些艰涩难懂的经济议题。
Really shocking thing right now is that we've done all the things that scholars of the Japanese experience thought would be the answer to prevent the same thing from happening in the United States, to prevent it from happening in Europe, and it has not been sufficient. So at this point, it's actually very, very tough.
而就在这个100年一次的危机当中，克鲁曼指出，当时的美国财政部长鲍尔森竟然在这要命时刻犯了致命错误，就是放任雷曼兄弟倒闭。
As far as we can make out, the president of the United States right now is Henry Paulson, right? I mean, we aren't hearing much from the White House, and we could do worse. But Paulson has shown some pretty bad judgment the last few weeks. Allowing Lehman to fail was a big mistake. This plan was clearly not what the doctor ordered.
克鲁曼在他的《纽约时报》专栏里毫不掩饰他对布希政府的批判，不过他却为英国首相布朗的救市方案背书。他说理由很简单，因为向银行注资解决了市场最根本的资金问题。
The root is the destruction of capital in the financial sector, and the way to address that, the obvious way to address it, is to infuse capital, to put in money, whereas the Paulson plan in the United States was somehow trying to do something else. We never quite understood how it was supposed to work. As best we understand, the Federal Reserve actually wanted something like the British plan quietly all along. So this is the right way to go.
不过克鲁曼也说，经济呈现螺旋式的下滑还没停止，这次的危机已经严重伤害全球经济，未来可能陷入长期衰退，但或许不至于崩盘变成大萧条。
We were heading into a fairly deep recession, I think, even before the financial markets went completely wild a few weeks ago. So what we're trying to do here is prevent what is almost guaranteed to be a nasty recession from turning into something much, much worse. Even if we do this repair, even if the financial thing works, even if the spreads in the money markets come down, we still have this nasty recession coming unless there's a really strong stimulus package. So this is emergency first aid to keep the thing from bleeding to death, you might say, but it doesn't heal the original injuries.
但刺激经济方案真的能解决所有的问题吗？
I think we need something much better than the one that the U.S. Congress passed, early this year. It's got to be something that really puts a lot of money in places where it will be spent. Emergency aid to state and local governments, public works. We need a lot of stuff this time.
听君一席话，胜读10年书。枯燥乏味的经济学，在克鲁曼的诠释下，似乎多了那么点人味。
Economics is not about love and the goodness of human nature. It's about people being selfish and the way that works out. So I guess it's never going to be a really happy science. But look, there's a lot of beauty in it. One of those things you don't expect to hear. But there's a lot of beauty in thinking about it, and I'm just very pleased that people saw some of that.
另外一位我们为大家准备的预言未来状况的是大前研一。大前研一呢，作为日本的趋势大师，虽然他的地位不像克鲁曼或是纽约大学的经济学教授，但是他是非常早就明确地说出来，美国的7000亿纾困方案是一个笑话。他说至少要5兆才够。而就在他说完这个话，大概5天到10天左右，美国政府现在联准会统计，大概美国现在金融产业里头至少亏损了3.6兆美金。换句话说，大前研一所说的5兆一点都不是危言耸听。来听一下大前研一对于美国经济的预言。他认为呢，美国经济将历经一个跟日本过去消失的10年一样的经济过程。看起来即使没有继续恶化，但是它要起来复苏。